I used to think betrayal would come with fireworks, loud arguments, slammed doors, someone shouting, "I'm leaving." That's how you expect a marriage to end when you've built a life, a business, and years of trust together. But when it came for me, it was quiet. It crept in like a draft under a closed door, barely noticeable at first, until the whole house felt cold. Running Barrett in with my wife Laura had always been my dream. It wasn't fancy, just 20 rooms on a stretch of beach that tourists stumbled upon more than they planned for, but it was ours. I handled the maintenance, the bookings, the day-to-day grind. Laura had the charm, the vision. She managed the marketing, the finances, the connections. We worked well together, at least I thought we did. It started with late nights. She said she was working on new deals, that she was trying to attract investors to help us expand. I believed her. I wanted to believe her. But then came the phone calls she'd take on the balcony when she thought I was asleep. One night, I heard a man's voice faintly through the glass door. I couldn't make out the words, but the tone was intimate, too casual for business. And then there was his name, Miles Davenport. In our town, everyone knew Miles. He was a smooth-talking investor who specialized in saving struggling businesses. In reality, he bought out desperate owners, took majority control, and turned their places into sterile, soulless moneymakers. I'd seen it happen to 3 hotels within 20 miles. I swore I'd never let him near ours. One evening, Laura came home past midnight. She smelled of whiskey and an expensive cologne that definitely wasn't mine. I asked where she'd been. She didn't flinch, didn't hesitate. "Business dinner," she said. "Potential investor." She kissed me lightly on the cheek, but it felt wrong, forced, calculated. A few days later, while Laura was out meeting clients, I found a draft of a contract in her desk drawer. Our hotel's name was right there, bold at the top. The terms hit me like a punch to the gut. Miles Davenport would invest $500,000 on the condition that he became the majority owner. Laura was listed as a co-signatory. My name wasn't on the document at all. I sat there for an hour, staring at it. Betrayal doesn't always hit you with rage. Sometimes it's a numb, hollow feeling, like watching your life be erased in real time. I wanted to confront her, scream, demand answers. But then something colder settled in me. No, not yet. I needed to know just how deep this went. For the next week, I played the fool. I smiled when she said she was staying late at the office. I nodded when she suggested outside funding. I even joked that maybe Miles Davenport could save us, pretending I didn't already know she was halfway to selling my life's work out from under me. Behind that mask, I started building my own defense. First, I secured everything. Transferred property deeds into a protected trust, moved business accounts to a safe holding structure she couldn't access without me. I changed authorizations on vendor contracts and quietly brought in a lawyer, an old friend who owed me a favor. Then I started gathering evidence. I checked call logs, copied her emails, and asked Sam, our front desk manager, to discreetly note whenever Miles showed up at the inn. Sam had been with me since the beginning. He didn't ask questions, just raised an eyebrow and said, "I figured something was up." Every night, when Laura thought I was asleep, I sat in the office, piecing together their betrayal. Each message, each draft, each hotel ledger she manipulated to make us look like we were bleeding money. It all formed a picture. And then, one night, Laura came home with a smile I hadn't seen in years. She poured herself a glass of wine, sat across from me at the kitchen table, and said casually, "Patrick, I've set up a private investor meeting for next week. Miles can really save us. You just have to trust me." I forced a smile, even as my stomach churned. I knew that meeting wouldn't just be about money. It was their moment to push me out, to hand over everything I'd built to a man who saw me as nothing more than an obstacle. But Laura didn't know something crucial. While she and Miles were busy plotting my downfall, I'd already begun crafting a trap. A fake transfer contract that looked perfectly real, designed to make them believe they'd won, until it all crumbled in their hands. And when that meeting came, I wouldn't just be defending my hotel. I'd be ending their little partnership before it even began. The week leading up to that investor meeting felt like living in a stranger's house. Laura moved differently now, lighter, almost excited. She started dressing up for business lunches, wearing perfume she hadn't touched in years. At night, when she came home, her laughter carried the kind of energy people get when they're falling in love or chasing a dream. Except neither of those things was supposed to happen while you were still married. I kept my face neutral, my voice steady. I had to. If Laura suspected that I knew, she might change her plan, making it harder to expose her and Miles. Instead, I played along, acted like the overworked husband too tired to notice anything wrong. I let her believe I trusted her. One afternoon, I watched from a distance as Miles pulled up to the hotel in his sleek black sedan. I was fixing a loose railing on the terrace when I saw Laura step outside to greet him. She glanced around first, scanning the parking lot to see if anyone was watching. That told me everything I needed to know. She wasn't proud of these meetings, she was hiding them. They walked to the far side of the pool area, out of earshot of guests and staff. From where I stood, I couldn't hear their words, but I saw Laura's hand on his arm, saw him lean close to whisper something that made her smile. It wasn't business talk. It was intimacy, the kind that doesn't belong between a married woman and another man. Sam caught me staring. He walked over, lowering his voice. "They've been meeting twice a week, boss. Always when you're out on errands. I thought you should know." I nodded, keeping my voice calm. "Good man. Just keep watching. Don't say a word to her." That night, I checked the hotel's security cameras. Sure enough, there they were. Laura leading Miles through the lobby to a private lounge we rarely used. She poured him drinks, they sat close together, and for an hour, my wife and this investor acted like teenagers on a date, laughing, leaning in, brushing hands across the table. It was sickening, but I didn't let myself get angry. Anger would ruin everything. Instead, I called my lawyer friend, Evan. "We're going to prepare a decoy contract," I told him. "Something that looks like a full transfer of majority shares to Miles Davenport." Evan chuckled darkly. "Let me guess, you're not actually giving him anything." "Not a damn thing," I said. "I just need him and Laura to think they've got it all figured out. When the time's right, we'll switch it on them." Over the next few days, Evan and I built the trap. The contract appeared legitimate, but had one key twist. It required an undisclosed third-party signature, one they'd never be able to produce, making it legally void. Meanwhile, I quietly shifted the inn's real ownership into an irrevocable trust, with me as sole trustee. Even if Laura and Miles dug deep, they'd find nothing they could legally touch. While I was preparing the legal side, Laura was busy trying to rewrite history. One night over dinner, she casually mentioned how hard it had been carrying the business on her shoulders. She said it like I was dead weight, like I hadn't spent years fixing pipes, handling guests, and keeping the place alive during slow seasons. "I just think," she said carefully, "that bringing Miles in could finally let us breathe. He understands growth, Patrick. He knows how to make an inn like ours thrive. Maybe you could step back a little. Let someone else handle the complicated parts." I set my fork down and looked at her, making sure my expression was calm. "Step back? From my own hotel." "From our hotel," she corrected quickly, reaching for my hand. "I'm just saying, it might be good for us. Less stress, more time for each other." It almost made me laugh. She was sitting there, rehearsing a future where I was quietly shoved out of my own business while she ran it with Miles. A future where I was expected to thank her for doing it. Instead of laughing, I nodded slowly. "Maybe you're right. Maybe I should let someone else take the reins for once." Her face lit up. She squeezed my hand. "You won't regret this, Patrick. Trust me." But I already knew trust had left our marriage a long time ago. 2 nights later, I caught her sneaking a late-night call on the balcony. I stepped silently into the hallway, close enough to hear. "Yes," she whispered, her voice soft, almost giddy. "He's buying it. He has no idea. Once Miles signs, Patrick won't have a leg to stand on. We'll have everything." A pause. "I know, baby. I want you to." I stepped back into the bedroom, my heart pounding but my face blank. When Laura came in later, I pretended to be asleep. She slipped into bed beside me, her hand brushing my arm like nothing had happened. In that moment, something inside me hardened. Whatever love or forgiveness might have survived before was gone now. She wasn't just planning to take my business. She was planning to take my dignity, my future, my very identity as the man who built Barrett Inn. But I wasn't about to let that happen. By the end of that week, every document, every piece of evidence I needed was ready. I had the fake contract locked in my desk, my lawyer on standby, and Sam keeping me updated on every move Laura and Miles made. They thought they were just days away from victory. They had no idea that every step they took was walking them deeper into my trap. When Laura told me the final investor meeting was scheduled, I smiled like a fool and kissed her on the cheek. Inside, I was already imagining the moment I'd pull the rug out from under them both. By the time Laura set the date for the final investor meeting, I had transformed into someone even she couldn't recognize. On the outside, I was the same old Patrick, hard-working, mild-mannered, the husband who never argued. But underneath, I had become something else entirely, a man building a quiet war, brick by brick, knowing exactly when to strike. The first step was ownership protection. Laura believed the inn was still jointly owned, half hers, half mine. That hadn't been true for weeks. With Evan's guidance, I had moved every legal claim, every title, into an irrevocable trust. The trustee? Me. If Laura tried to sell, sign, or transfer anything, it would be as if she were selling a car she didn't own. Nothing would stick. Next came the decoy contract. Evan and I spent nights drafting it, making sure it looked flawless, lawyerly language, corporate seals, legitimate signatures. It was designed to make Miles believe he'd secured 70% ownership in Barrett Inn. The catch? A hidden clause requiring approval from a silent investor named Coastal Development Group, a company that didn't exist. Without that signature, the contract wasn't worth the paper it was printed on. I didn't stop there. I also arranged financial safeguards. The inn's main accounts were rerouted to a bank Miles couldn't access. Payroll and supplier contracts were revised to require dual authorization. Mine and Sam's, never Laura's. Even the liquor license and zoning permits were locked under the trust, making them untouchable. If Laura and Miles somehow managed to push me out, they'd be left with a hollow shell. No money, no permits, no legal authority to run the place. While I built these walls, I also had to play my part convincingly. At breakfast one morning, Laura sat across from me, sipping her coffee with that same confident smirk she'd been wearing for weeks. Miles says we should renovate the lobby after the deal closes, she said casually. Something more upscale. You've done great with maintenance, Patrick, but it's time for professional management. I nodded slowly, letting a hint of weariness creep into my voice. Maybe you're right. I'm not sure I've got the energy for big changes anymore. She smiled sweetly, leaning over to kiss my cheek. See? This is why I love you. You know when to let go. In that moment, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. She genuinely believed she was outsmarting me, that I was some tired, broken man who would just hand over everything without a fight. But pity wouldn't save her. Later that day, Sam came to my office. Boss, he said, closing the door behind him. She brought Davenport here again. Took him straight into the private lounge. Looked real cozy. I sighed, keeping my face neutral. Good. Let them think they're safe. Sam frowned. You sure you're ready for this? They're playing dirty. I met his eyes. So am I. Only difference is, I play smarter. The final piece of my plan involved evidence and exposure. Quietly, I'd been compiling a portfolio of Laura's betrayal, text messages, phone logs, and the hotel's own security footage showing her intimate meetings with Miles. My lawyer told me I could use this as leverage in divorce court or, if necessary, as public proof of misconduct. Either way, she wouldn't walk away clean. But my real masterpiece would be the shareholders' meeting Laura had arranged. It was meant to be the moment she and Miles announced their glorious partnership, the day Patrick Barrett was officially out of his own hotel. I knew better. At that meeting, I planned to sign over control using the decoy contract. They'd leave the room celebrating, thinking they'd won. Within 48 hours, when they tried to enforce their new ownership, they'd discover the trap. The trust would block any legal transfer. The contract would be declared void. All financial and operational control would remain mine. And just when they thought they could sue, my lawyer would reveal the collected evidence of their collusion, turning any legal threat into a public scandal. 2 nights before the meeting, I rehearsed the scene in my head. I'd arrive looking defeated, maybe even a little drunk. Laura would smirk. Miles would gloat. They'd push papers in front of me, papers they thought would erase me from Barrett Inn. And I'd sign them. Happily. Because when you know the building is wired to collapse, you don't stop your enemies from walking inside. You hold the door open and let them step in willingly. That night, as Laura slept peacefully beside me, dreaming of her bright future with Miles Davenport, I sat in my office finalizing the trap. The ink on the decoy contract dried as I sealed it in a leather folder. For years, I'd fixed broken pipes, patched holes in walls, and made sure Barrett Inn survived storms and hurricanes. This was no different. Only this time, the storm wasn't weather. It was my own wife and her lover. And I had every intention of surviving it. The morning of the meeting, Laura cheerfully kissed me goodbye, not knowing that by the end of it, she'd be stepping into the biggest mistake of her life. The morning of the shareholders' meeting was unlike any other. I woke before dawn, not from nerves, but from anticipation. It felt like the hours before a hurricane made landfall. You can see the sky darken, you know the chaos is coming, but you also know you've boarded up every window, bolted every door. Laura hummed cheerfully as she got ready, her silk blouse and pencil skirt looking more suited for a gala than a business meeting. She spritzed on perfume, the same one I'd smelled on her weeks ago when she came home late. She caught me looking and smiled. "Patrick," she said warmly, "you'll see. Today changes everything for us." I just nodded, sipping my coffee. She mistook my silence for resignation. That suited me perfectly. By 10 a.m., we arrived at the hotel's conference room. Laura had arranged the space meticulously. A polished mahogany table, neatly stacked documents, water glasses, and a large Barrett and logo displayed proudly on the wall. Miles Davenport stood near the window, his tailored suit catching the morning light, his watch gleaming like he wanted the whole town to know just how successful he was. When Miles saw me, he offered a smug smile. "Patrick," he said, voice dripping with false camaraderie, "thanks for agreeing to this. It's the right move for Barrett Inn." I forced a weary smile. "Just here to do what's best for the hotel." We sat down. Laura took the seat beside Miles instead of next to me. That simple gesture told me everything about where her loyalties lay. She didn't even try to hide it anymore. Miles began the meeting with a speech about growth opportunities and new leadership. He spoke as if he already owned the place, outlining renovations, rebranding efforts, even talking about hiring new management. I sat quietly, occasionally nodding, letting him believe he was winning. Laura chimed in with her own digs. "Patrick has worked hard," she said sweetly, patting my hand like I was a retiring grandfather. "But we all know he's not equipped to take Barrett Inn to the next level. This deal ensures our future." Our future. She said it like I was included in that hour. She had no idea that future would crumble before her very eyes. Miles slid a folder across the table. "All we need is your signature," he said confidently. "This agreement gives me majority control, and Laura will oversee operations. You'll stay on in a smaller advisory role, of course." I opened the folder slowly, pretending to read the document I had personally designed with Evan. Every clause, every line, was a piece of bait. "You're sure this is fair?" I asked quietly, glancing between them. Miles smiled like a wolf. "More than fair. You'll thank us later." Laura leaned in, her eyes gleaming with triumph. "Sign it, Patrick. This is how we save everything we've built." I let out a long sigh, my hands shaking slightly, not from fear, but from the effort of maintaining the act. Finally, I picked up the pen, scrawled my name across the contract, and pushed it back toward Miles. The satisfaction on their faces was almost too much to watch. Laura clasped Miles's hand under the table, thinking I didn't see. Miles leaned back in his chair, already talking about next steps, as though the inn was his kingdom now. But the meeting wasn't over. Miles stood, offering his hand for a shake. "Welcome to the future of Barrett Inn," he said grandly. I shook it, meeting his eyes. "I'm sure it'll be memorable." Laura hugged me lightly, whispering in my ear, "You won't regret this." I forced a smile, murmuring just loud enough for her to hear, "I'm counting on it." As they toasted to their victory with champagne Laura had arranged, I excused myself, claiming I needed fresh air. Outside the conference room, I leaned against the wall, letting the mask slip for just a second. I wasn't broken, I wasn't defeated. I was patient. By evening, Laura and Miles paraded around the hotel like royalty. They called a brief staff meeting, announcing big changes, while I stood silently at the back, pretending to be nothing more than a supportive husband. Some employees looked confused, others nervous. Sam caught my eye briefly, his face calm. He knew the truth, knew everything was under control. Later that night, I found Laura in our office, sipping wine and reviewing papers. She was glowing. "Patrick," she said, walking over to kiss me on the cheek, "I know this was hard for you, but you did the right thing. We're going to be so much happier now." I looked into her eyes, pretending to be resigned. "As long as you're happy," I said softly. She smiled, completely fooled, and went back to her papers. She had no clue that the documents she was holding weren't worth the paper they were printed on. No clue that while she and Miles celebrated, I'd already set the wheels in motion for their public, irreversible fall. And when it came, it would be loud enough to shatter the facade they'd built. 2 days after the so-called shareholders' meeting, I woke up to the sound of Laura barking orders over the phone. She wasn't even pretending anymore. Yes, Miles will handle all the finances now, she was saying sharply. Patrick won't be involved in approvals moving forward. Understood. She ended the call, walked past me without a glance, and grabbed her keys. Miles and I are meeting with a contractor, she said. We're starting renovations next month. I nodded, letting her think I was too beaten down to argue. But inside, I was counting down the hours until their carefully laid plans turned to ash. By noon, Laura and Miles arrived at the bank, swaggering in like they already owned Barrett Inn. They handed the contract to the bank manager, demanding access to our accounts to begin transition planning. What they didn't expect was the manager's blank stare. "I'm sorry," he said, flipping through the papers. "This contract isn't enforceable. The property and business accounts are held in a protected trust. Without the trustee's signature, nothing changes." Laura's face flushed red. Miles leaned in, his voice rising. "What do you mean?" Patrick signed the transfer. The manager shook his head. "Even if he did, this document requires approval from Coastal Development Group." He pointed to the clause Evan and I had crafted so carefully. "No such approval, no transfer." Laura's voice cracked. "That's impossible." Miles grabbed the folder, scanning it frantically. "He signed this," he barked again, but his confidence was cracking. They stormed out of the bank, furious, only to hit their next wall at the county office. There, they were told that the hotel's deed had been moved into an irrevocable trust weeks ago. Legally, Patrick Barrett was the sole controlling trustee. By the time they returned to the hotel that evening, Laura's hands were shaking. She found me in the lobby, calmly chatting with Sam as if it were any other day. "We need to talk," she hissed, dragging me into the office. Miles followed, his face dark with rage. "What the hell did you do?" Miles spat. "You signed that contract." I looked between them, feigning confusion. "Signed what?" "Oh, you mean that draft you shoved at me during your little meeting? You really thought I'd hand over my life's work without looking at the fine print?" Laura's jaw dropped. "You?" I cut her off, my voice cold and steady. "You thought I was an idiot. You thought you could sneak behind my back, sell my hotel, and run it with your boyfriend here." While I smiled and nodded. "Did you really think I didn't see the late-night calls, the cozy meetings in the lounge, the hotel's security footage?" Her face went pale. Miles tried to recover his swagger. "You can't prove." "Oh, I can prove everything," I interrupted, pulling out a folder I'd prepared weeks ago. I dropped it on the desk. Emails, text messages, photos, copies of the draft contracts Laura had hidden. "This is enough to not only void every pathetic attempt you've made to steal this place, but also charge you both with attempted fraud. Want to push me? I'll walk this straight to the DA's office." Laura's eyes welled with tears. "Patrick, I didn't let her finish. Save it. You didn't just try to ruin me. You betrayed everything we built, every guest we served, every night we worked late dreaming of making this place special. You threw it away for Miles Davenport and a promise of easy money." Miles stepped forward, trying to regain control. "You think you've won, Barrett? I have lawyers." I laughed, a dry, humorless sound. "Lawyers? Go ahead. The trust is ironclad. The contract you celebrated over? Void. Financial control? Locked. And thanks to these." I tapped the evidence folder. "Every move you made leaves you open to public humiliation and possible prosecution." Laura collapsed into a chair, trembling. Miles cursed under his breath, realizing just how deep a hole he'd fallen into. But I wasn't done. That evening, I called a staff meeting. Every employee gathered in the conference room. Housekeepers, managers, kitchen staff, all of them worried about the chaos they'd witnessed. Laura and Miles stood awkwardly to the side, pale and silent. I addressed the room calmly. "Some of you may have heard rumors about new management. Let me clear that up. Barrett Inn isn't changing hands. It never was." I glanced at Laura, then back to the staff. "There was an attempt to push me out, to sell this place behind my back. But thanks to proper planning, this hotel stays right where it belongs, with the people who built it." Whispers rippled through the room. Miles shifted uncomfortably. Laura stared at the floor. Sam raised a hand. "And them?" he asked, nodding toward the would-be power couple. I took a deep breath. Laura will no longer have any role in operations. As for Mr. Davenport, he'll be leaving now and will not set foot on this property again. I turned to Miles. "You have 30 minutes to collect whatever you left here. After that, you're trespassing." Miles muttered something under his breath and stormed out. Laura didn't move. When the room cleared, I faced her one last time. I'll be filing for divorce. You'll get nothing. Not from the inn, not from me. You can stay in the guest wing tonight, but tomorrow morning, you're gone. She opened her mouth to plead, but I stopped her with a raised hand. You had your chance to build a life with me. You chose him. And now, you can live with that choice. The morning after the staff meeting, I walked into the lobby of Barrett Inn and found Laura sitting on one of the worn leather couches we'd bought together years ago. She wasn't wearing her usual sharp suits. No makeup, no polished hair, just a plain hoodie and jeans. For a moment, I almost saw the woman I married, the one who dreamed of running a cozy seaside inn with me. But that woman was gone. She looked up as I approached. "Patrick," she said softly, her voice raw from crying. "I made a mistake. I know that now. Miles, he promised me something more. I thought we could make this place bigger, better." I stayed standing, arms crossed. Bigger for who? Better for you? You were ready to sell me out, Laura. Not just the business, me. Our marriage. Tears welled in her eyes. "I thought you'd given up. I thought you were tired." I shook my head slowly. I was tired, but not of us. Not until you turned it into this. I gestured toward the hotel around us, still standing because I refused to let her destroy it. "You didn't just cheat on me with Miles. You tried to erase me from my own life. That's not a mistake, Laura. That's a choice." She broke down then, sobbing quietly. But there was no relief for me in seeing her cry. Whatever bond we had was already shattered beyond repair. By midday, she left Barrett Inn for good. I had Sam walk her out the side entrance to avoid a scene. She packed her clothes and jewelry into a single suitcase, leaving behind the expensive office decor she'd bought with my money. I watched from an upstairs window as she got into a rideshare and disappeared down the coastal road. Miles Davenport's fall came even faster. Within days, news of his attempted hostile takeover and his personal entanglement with a married co-owner spread through town. Other hotel owners, wary of his tactics, canceled their talks with him. Investors pulled out of his pending projects. By the end of the month, Davenport was liquidating assets to cover mounting debts. The man who walked into Barrett in believing he'd conquer it left with nothing but a tarnished reputation. As for me, I didn't celebrate. There was no champagne toast, no victory party. Instead, I got to work. The first thing I did was restore calm among the staff. Some of them had been on edge, unsure if they'd lose their jobs under new management. I called everyone together in the dining hall and said plainly, "This hotel stays the same. We're keeping what makes us Barrett Inn: personal service, honesty, and a place that feels like home. Anyone who stood by me during this will have a future here." The applause that followed was quiet but genuine. Next, I walked through every inch of the hotel, the rooms, the lobby, the kitchen, the grounds. I made notes on repairs, renovations we actually needed, not flashy nonsense that Miles had been planning. Barrett Inn wasn't a failing business. It just needed attention, dedication. The same things Laura had forgotten when she let greed and romance cloud her judgment. In the evenings, when the guests had settled in and the halls were quiet, I'd sit out on the porch overlooking the ocean. It was the same view Laura and I used to share, dreaming about building a life together. Now I sat alone, and for the first time, that felt right. One night, Sam joined me with a beer in hand. "Boss," he said, settling into the chair beside me, "you handled that whole mess like a pro. Most men would have lost their minds." I took a slow sip. I wanted to, I admitted. But anger doesn't fix broken pipes, and it doesn't fix betrayal either. You patch the leaks, reinforce the beams, and make sure the storm doesn't take the whole house down. Sam chuckled. "And you did more than patch it. You rebuilt it." Weeks passed, and guests began noticing the changes. The hotel felt warmer again. I greeted visitors personally, shared stories of the inn's history, and made sure no one left without feeling cared for. Bookings climbed, and loyal customers returned, relieved to see Barrett and hadn't been swallowed by corporate greed. Legally, the divorce moved quickly. Evan handled everything with precision. Laura tried to argue for a settlement, but between the evidence of infidelity, attempted fraud, and her own admission of misconduct, she had no claim to the inn or its profits. The court awarded her nothing but her personal belongings and a modest alimony check to keep the process clean. Months later, word reached me that Laura had moved inland, working reception at a budget motel under her maiden name. Miles had vanished into obscurity, rumored to be hustling small-time investments to keep afloat. The empire they tried to build on my back never materialized. Barrett Inn, however, thrived. I used the money I'd saved protecting it to renovate. Not a flashy rebrand, but real improvements. New roofs, upgraded guest rooms, a refreshed dining hall. Guests loved the changes, not because they were expensive, but because they made the inn feel even more like home. One morning, as the sun rose over the ocean and lights spilled across the sand, I hung a new sign over the entrance. Barrett Inn, family-owned since 2009. It wasn't just a name. It was a statement. No outsider, no opportunist, no betrayal would ever take it from me again. I didn't win by yelling or by fighting tooth and nail in public. I won by staying calm, planning quietly, and letting the truth do the damage for me. And as I stood there, watching a family check in for their weekend stay, I felt something I hadn't in months. Not revenge, not triumph, but peace. Laura and Miles had tried to steal my life. Instead, they walked away with nothing but their own disgrace. Barrett Inn was still mine, and it always would be.